Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the launch of the e-guide book, a practical legal guide to entrepreneurial ventures. We're very excited to be here. It's a practical guide. So just a couple of practicalities. One is feel free to use the chat to make comments. And the second is that this event is being recorded. For the purpose of introductions, Biniam Dawit Mazmur is my name. I am the Deputy Dean for Postgraduate and Research at the Faculty of Law. We have a very exciting program for today. The first speaker who will actually grace the occasion by providing the welcome in the context is Professor Vivian Lavag. She is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic at the University of the Western Cape. She's also a Professor of Law in the Department of Mercantile and Labor Law in the Faculty of Law at UWC, and she serves on a number of boards and councils, including being chair of the Moravian Church Trust, a member of the South African Judicial Education Institute Council, and a member of the Kepler Institute Board and Kepler College Board in Rwanda. Professor Lavag holds a B. Juris cum laude, LLB cum laude, and LLM from Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth. She also holds LLD from UNISA. She's an admitted non-practicing advocate of the High Court of South Africa. Professor Lavag began and advanced her legal career by spending a number of years at the South African Reserve Bank in various capacities, including senior payment system analyst, senior legal consultant, and as a senior legal counsel for Strat Limited, South Africa Central Securities Depository. In 2008, she moved to the Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth, where she served as the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law. Professor Lavag joined UWC on 1 April 2015. It feels like just a couple of weeks ago. And in her capacity as Deputy Vice Chancellor at UWC, she is currently leading UWC's academic project in relation to its learning and teaching activities at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. She's an expert in law, economics, and the intersection of the two fields, both at an international level and in the South African context. She also has contract policy and legislative drafting experience. As regards her academic career, Professor Lavag has published extensively, including numerous articles, reports, and contributions to chapters in books. She's also delivered papers at conferences, both locally and internationally. Professor Lavag has also supervised a number of masters and doctoral candidates and continues to do so, including, of course, at our faculty, at the Faculty of Law. Her field of academic research is in the legal and regulatory frameworks pertaining to the payment system, banking system, and financial markets in South Africa. And Professor Lavag is highly engaged in her community, regularly chairing and or participating in various committees in the legal, financial, and educational sectors, leveraging her expertise to add value and push her community to greater heights. Thank you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Biniam Mazmur, our Deputy Dean, as he stated, and also our moderator here this afternoon for that really generous introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor for me to open the launch of the e-guide book, a practical legal guide to entrepreneurial ventures, not just as UWC, on behalf of UWC, who is hosting the event, but as a co-author with Lynette Visagie, Swart, and Pieter Visagie. I would like to acknowledge a few people present here today, albeit virtually. It would have been lovely to have been in a venue today to have this celebration. Our Chair of Council, Ms. Yasmin Forbes, a member of our UWC Council, Ms. Handy Wessels, Advocate Rory Fowler, Commissioner of the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, also known as SIPSI, Advocate Christa Clocko, Senior Manager for Companies from SIPSI, Ms. Rialda Williams, Senior Manager Innovation and Collaboration from SIPSI, and then our dear colleagues from LexisNexis, our publishers, Mr. Johan Botha, Ms. Santish Deval, Mr. Kitso Mutupi, Mr. Obi Mutlanke, and Ms. Elna Brelacher. I have noticed that from the law faculty, I would also like to acknowledge Professor Jacques de Ville, the Dean of Law, the two Deputy Deans, Prof. Mazmur, that you've already met, who's the Deputy Dean for Research and Postgrad Studies, and then the Deputy Dean of for learning and teaching, Professor Leah Monbene. I would also like to welcome the HOD of my home department in the faculty of Mercantile and Labour Law Department, Professor Ricky Vandra. I see that Mr. Shamil Jassim, the director of the Law Clinic, is also here, who collaborates with us, and Professor Esau will be doing the closing later, who is part of our project as well. All the academics, whether from UWC or elsewhere, honored guests, our students, especially our students from the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic, our honored guests, and last but not least, my two co-authors, Lynette and Pieter. My role here today is to give a bit of context to our interactive e-guide. And as a bit of a storyteller, I would like to give you a glimpse into the journey to this launch. Since this e-guide is inextricably linked to zone learning at UWC, I first need to tell you the story of zone learning at UWC. Zone learning at UWC is one of my apex projects within my office. And I got the idea when I went on a trip with our Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Bladen Zamande. It was probably in 2017. And we visited Ryerson University. One of the universities we visited was Ryerson University in Toronto. And I was blown away by this entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial incubation space that Ryerson had. And they called theirs zone learning, and I was interested to learn more about it. So in a subsequent visit, I went by myself and a colleague, and I then met with my counterpart, the provost on that side, and started learning about what zone learning really entails. Dr. Morton and I then wrote a grant proposal to DHET, and we were successful in obtaining funding to start zone learning at UWC, and that is how it was born. Our institutional operating plan, we have these words that I'm always dreaming about at UWC, that our students, our graduates would have a pioneering spirit, and that they will have entrepreneurial skills and mindset. In fact, in addition to, or in a sense, also part of those kind of graduate attributes that one can link to, that will be needed in the fifth industrial revolution and a changing world of work. So with this entrepreneurial incubation space, which we now have at UWC, it provides an experiential learning experience for our students linked to curriculum, and this is what distinguishes us, linked to curriculum and integrated with community engagement, which is in the DNA of UWC. We were going to launch last year in March, but then we had to launch virtually due to COVID. But we thought, since we have the creativity within the zone, as we call it, we would do it not in a webinar, but we launched zone learning in the form of a documentary film, which was filmed by Dr. Jacob Kluter, also present here today. Zone learning has three arms. One, the new transmedia clinic in collaboration with the Faculty of Arts, the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic in collaboration with the Faculty of Law, and the Small Business Clinic in collaboration with the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. Late in 2019, I realized that we actually need a training manual. That's what I called it at the time. And then I thought of Lynette, was a brilliant LLM student. She did an LLM with me at NMU in financial markets law, and with whom we've co-authored to date 4 articles in accredited law journals. So I knew that, and she was a practicing attorney, and I knew that Lynette would totally be excited about this training manual. So what started off as a training manual for entrepreneurial law clinic students grew into something else. And one day I said, last year during this pandemic, we were busy with the training manual, and I said to Lynette, but there's a book in this. She agreed very excitedly, and we reconceptualized it, restructured, had to rewrite, refine, and later we wrote in Pieter, who is a patent attorney, to be a contributor and write the intellectual property law chapter. Pieter, of course, had no choice because he coincidentally also happens to be Lynette's husband. And I've known Lynette for about 12 years now. I know that she can be very determined. In steps Santish Deval from LexisNexis, who was very interested when I contacted her and I explained the book concept, but also that that we actually had, at that stage already in July 2020, a completed book of approximately 450 pages. But in various meetings with LexisNexis, our publishers, we saw an opportunity for a different kind of ebook, an interactive e-guide, a first for us as the authors and a first for LexisNexis. And if we thought that it was going to be easier than a printed book or a static ebook, we were sorely mistaken. Kitso had to build the book from scratch with our content, and Obi was also very instrumental in its design. I'm sure that Santish will share their experience and later, and Kitso will show us a video on the e-guide to give you a sense of it. Let me just say that the authors, the three of us, celebrated with some good red wine on my stoop the day when we finally signed off that final proof, Santish. Thank you, Santish, and the whole of the LexisNexis team for your willingness to take a leap and for being creative with us. We learned together on this journey. I must say, just tongue in cheek, I've started my new book, Prof. Mesboer, you'll be very happy to know that. And trust me, it will either be in print or a static ebook. But this journey, I will definitely, and I'm sure I speak for Lynette and for Pieter, we will always cherish this journey. Thank you to all who made this possible, as well as those who made the launch possible today, and they will be thanked formally later. Finally, thanks to Lynette and Pieter. Lynette has now registered as an LLD student in fintech law, focusing on the regulation of on fintech regulation in certain financial markets, certain segments of the financial markets, in the sense a start of a new journey for her as well at UWC. To all of you who are in attendance, for those on the program, thank you for sharing in our celebration. Now we will listen to my podcast, which is part of the introduction to the e-guide. I thank you.
This interactive book, a practical legal guide to entrepreneurial ventures. You as a user will be reminded of the substantive law on entrepreneurial entities in South Africa, but more importantly, be guided on the practical aspects of the various ventures. We, the authors, cover sole proprietorships, partnerships, trusts, community trusts and other charitable vehicles, some forms of companies that you may use. We guide you on the advantages and disadvantages of an entity, what to consider when you select the type of entity, what the consequences are of selecting such entity, and then practically how to form or incorporate the entity and how to terminate. In this book, we also give some useful tips, information, and resources that you can use. The idea is that you will practice to do the various agreements and forms yourself. This book is intended not only as a guide to train students in the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic as part of zone learning at UWC, but can be used by individual entrepreneurs, other clinics, government agencies in the small business space, NGOs, and even for vocational training of legal professionals, to name a few. Good luck as you embark on this learning journey and on your entrepreneurial venture. From the authors, Ms. Lynette Visagie Swart, myself, Professor Vivian Lawack, speaking in this podcast, and our contributor on intellectual property law issues, Mr. Pieter Visagie.
Thank you very much, Professor Lavag for the welcome, for setting the scene, and in doing so, for also providing some human element into this. It's not just only individuals that are interested in getting the work done and getting behind the computer and doing the writing and so forth, but also you had some good and useful interaction, but also the celebration. I can assure you that all the occasions where you mentioned that I would be happy to hear, I am absolutely delighted. Now, I have the privilege to introduce the next two speakers. First is Miss Lynette Visagie Swart. She is a lecturer at the University of the Western Cape and enrolled, as was mentioned, for her Doctor of Laws at UWC in March 2021. She holds a Baccalaureus Legum cum laude and a Magister Legum LLM in Mercantile Law from the Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth. She's also an admitted practicing attorney of the High Court of South Africa. Lynette started her working career in 2010 at Norton Rose Fulbright, South Africa, which was previously known as the Nesreeds, a global law firm with offices more than 50 cities worldwide. She was admitted as an attorney in February 2012. On completion of her articles and admission as an attorney, Lynette was promoted to an associate position in both the commercial department and the banking and finance department of Norton Rose Fulbright in the Cape Town office. Lynette has advised both local and international banks as well as asset managers on the South African regulatory environment, especially the South African Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, the Collective Schemes Control Act, and the Banks Act. On the commercial side, Lynette has extensive experience in the drafting of shareholders' agreements, memoranda of incorporation, loan agreements, and related security documents. She also has experience in advising clients on the implementation and application of the Companies Act 71 of 2008 and other general company law matters. In addition, Lynette was involved in the setting up of trusts for clients and advising on trust legislation generally. As part of her practice, Lynette was intimately involved in the setting up of companies, the maintenance of company secretarial records for clients, and reviewing company prospectuses. She was also involved in the due diligence processes for various mergers and acquisitions here in South Africa. In August 2014, Lynette was offered and accepted a secondment to the Norton Rose Fulbright Purse Office. During this 6-month secondment, she was involved in a number of project finance, acquisition finance, syndicated lending, and trade finance matters. The next speaker was also mentioned, Mr. Pieter Visagie. He is a partner at the law firm Adams & Adams. He's a registered patent attorney and holds B Engineering from the University of Stellenbosch and LLB from UNISA. Pieter is a member of the International Federation of Patent Agents, Legal Practice Council, Licensing Executive Society, and the Southern Africa Research and Innovation Management Association. He's also a fellow of the South African Institute of Intellectual Property Law and was recently recognized in the 2019 and 2020 IAM Patent 1000 listings. Pieter specializes in the drafting of patent specifications and the filing and prosecution of patent applications, both locally and abroad. He also has extensive experience in intellectual property due diligence investigations and intellectual property portfolio management. In this regard, he serves as an advisor on the intellectual property management committees of a number of companies. Pieter particularly contributed to the Part F of the e-guide. It's over to you, Lynette.
Thanks, Prof, and thanks, Prof Lawack, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you for attending today's book launch. I would also like to thank my co-authors, Prof Lawack and Pieter, for their respective contributions to the e-guide. And then finally, I would like to thank the LexisNexis team, especially Sintish, Johan, Kitso, and Obi, for all their hard work and effort that went into the building of the e-guide and for making it as interactive as possible. From my side, I would like to give you a brief overview of the e-guide by taking you through the outcomes of each part of the e-guide. So Melody, you can move to the first slide, please. As you will see, Part A deals with sole proprietorships in South Africa. Upon completion of this specific part, the reader should know and understand what a sole proprietorship entails, how it is formed, to whom the business assets and liabilities belong, when and how a sole proprietorship can be terminated, the advantages and disadvantages of a sole proprietorship as a business entity, the obligations of a sole proprietor, and the Consumer Protection Act and the registration of a defensive name with this subsidy. From a practical legal viewpoint, the reader should be able to demonstrate the ability to 1. Register a defensive name with subsidy, and 2. Obtain other mandatory registrations and approvals in terms of applicable legislation. This specific part contains 2 podcasts and 2 videos. They relate to the registration of a defensive name with subsidy, including how the process currently works and how the current relevant subsidy form should be completed. The podcast also contains some tips and guidance on how to check on subsidy's website if a name similar to that of your proposed name for your subsidy reservation exists, and what to do if in fact that is the case. The second part B, is the introduction to partnerships in South Africa. Upon completion of this part, the reader should know and understand the partnership as a business entity and the different types of partnerships in South Africa, the essentialia and naturalia of a partnership, the liabilities of partners, including possible criminal and intellectual liability, the termination and liquidation of a partnership and associated formalities, and the Consumer Protection Act and registration as a defensive name with the subsidy. From a practical legal viewpoint, the reader should be able to demonstrate the ability to register a defensive name with subsidy, obtain other mandatory registrations in terms of applicable legislation, and then also draft a basic partnership agreement. This part contains 3 podcasts and 2 videos. They relate to the registration of a defensive name with subsidy, again including how the process currently works and how the current relevant subsidy forms should be completed. There is also a podcast by Professor Lavag dealing with the tips and guidance, including drafting notes relating to the drafting of a basic ordinary partnership. Melody, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. Part C deals with trusts in South Africa, and the focus is on inter vivos trusts. Upon completion of Part C, the readers should know and understand the legal nature of a trust, the legal formation, framework formation, amendment, and termination of trusts, and the legal requirements relating to an inter vivos trust. From a practical legal viewpoint, the reader should be able to demonstrate the ability to draft and lodge an application for the register of an inter vivos trust, how to operate a trust and to register amendments to a trust deeds, and then finally to draft a basic trust deed. This specific part contains 3 podcasts. They deal with practical tips and guidance on the trust registration application process, and then the actual registration of an inter vivos trust, including the prescribed forms that need to be submitted with your trust deed and how to make payments to the master's office. The podcasts also deal with practical tips and guidance in respect of the opening of a separate bank account for a registered trust. You can move on to, thank you. Part D deals with companies and in South Africa, and it specifically focuses on private companies. Upon completion of Part D, the reader should know and understand companies and close corporation as business entities, the formation of a company's memorandum of incorporation, the company-related SIPC documents and interactions with the SIPC, and the company records and the company register and minute book. From a practical legal viewpoint, the reader should be able to demonstrate the ability to maintain company records and a company minute book, and then also draft a basic shareholders agreement. Part E deals with charity or charitable vehicles in South Africa. Upon the completion of this part, the reader should know and understand what public benefit organization, or also known as PBOs, and non-profit organizations and non-profit companies are, as well as the legal requirements, application requirements, and the processes of the registration for each vehicle. Part F deals with the intellectual property law, and this is where I hand over to Pieter.
Thanks very much, Lynette. Good afternoon, everyone, Professor Lawack and distinguished guests. It's a privilege for me to address you this afternoon, and I think more so for Adams and Adams and for me to have been given the opportunity to contribute to the e-guide that we are launching today. And for this opportunity, I thank both Prof. Lawack and Lynette, and I think they deserve thanks not so much for the fact that they look to me to make the contribution that I've been allowed to make, but more so for their sensitivity to the relevance of intellectual property to the interests of entrepreneurs. And in this regard, I recall the topic of this year's intellectual property, World Intellectual Property Day, which was specifically directed to intellectual property in the context of small to medium enterprises and how to take ideas to market. Now, in my experience as a patent attorney and in legal practice, as I also indicated in the various presentations that I've contributed to in relation to World IP Day, intellectual property is often an area of the law that's not paid sufficient attention by entrepreneurs. In the cases in which it is paid attention, I've found that entrepreneurs often misalign their commercial interests and their intellectual property strategy based on a deficient practical understanding of intellectual property in a commercial context. It's this experience of mine that has informed the approach that I have taken in contributing to the e-guide, which has been to deal with intellectual property law in a broader conceptual manner with reference to practical considerations and outcomes, rather than with reference to the details of intellectual property laws themselves that are often cast in quite abstract terms that are difficult for entrepreneurs and even some attorneys to bring home to more practical concepts. I believe that this approach would, I hope, equip readers of the intellectual property section of the e-guide with a clearer understanding of the place of intellectual property in an entrepreneurial setting and how to think in establishing a valuable intellectual property position that is aligned with their commercial interests. In this vein, I would then hope that the e-guide would also be instructive to students so that they may, from the point of view of their graduation and from the point of having graduated, be placed in a position in which they would from the start be sensitive to the place and the context of intellectual property ownership, and that would place them in a position to guide individuals who may approach them for advice in a practical manner from the outset, which in the context of intellectual property law is something absolutely essential to know what you should do from the start and to take those relevant steps for those who may be familiar with intellectual property. If we then look at the outcomes that the intellectual property section of the e-guide seeks to achieve, these are as presented on the screen, and I can maybe give some context to those. The first is to understand the relationship between creatorship and ownership and the consequences that arise from creatorship, and specifically that creatorship itself does not necessarily cause ownership. The second instance, to understand and have knowledge of the types of intellectual creations that exist and that are recognized in the law, and the basis of the ability to assert ownership in respect of such intellectual creations. In the third instance, we should look at the role of confidentiality in protecting intellectual creations, which is often the first port of call, or should be the first port of call for entrepreneurs. In the fourth instance, we would then look at different options for protecting intellectual creations, which would then be in advance of, or rather subsequent to, having established confidentiality where it is applicable. In the fifth instance, people should understand the processes that are associated with obtaining patent protection, register design protection, trademark protection, and copyright protection, which are, of course, the statutory forms of intellectual property that are recognized. And fifthly and finally, I believe that an understanding of unlawful competition and its place in the context of intellectual property protection is also required, since in the absence of taking positive steps to protect intellectual property through the instruments that are available, most people will ultimately end up in a position where they would need to rely on the principles of unlawful competition to defend or protect their rights. It's my view that these outcomes are what not only students, but also entrepreneurs should be equipped with to develop an appreciation for intellectual property and an entrepreneurial context. And it's truly my hope that this e-guide would make a valuable contribution to the entrepreneurial landscape in South Africa. And it's certainly been a privilege for me to have been involved in its compilation, along with Professor Lawack and Lynette. With that, I thank you, and I give the floor back to Lynette.
Thanks, Pieter. Before we hand over to the LexisNexis team, Prof. Lawack and I have asked one of our outstanding entrepreneurial law clinic students named Taffy to just say a few words on her experience on the e-guide and the LEG 401 module in which they are being lectured on the e-guide, as well as the weekly assignments that they are busy doing on the e-guide. So over to you, Taffy.
Afternoon, everyone. So my experience with the e-guide is that I find it to be an enhanced book-like experience. And what I like about it is that it's not static. And what I mean by that is that it's not text focused to the point where the only thing it has to offer you is just a whole lot of knowledge, but the graphic elements that were put into it, like the images and the podcasts that I also found on the e-guide, they make it interactive and engaging, and it encourages participation on the part of the reader. And that is what I like about it. And the other thing with the entrepreneurial law clinic assignments that we get, I find them to reinforce, they reinforce concepts that we learned in school if you did business in school and EMS, but it gives you the legal elements to it as well. And it also encourages you to explore more, because sometimes the questions you're given, you haven't done that work yet. So you have to do your research, which all in all, it works to your advantage because researching skills are essential for law students. And with the LEG, the other thing I like where the LEG module comes in is that between the three of them, there is this, you find it to be connected. There's this interlink between them, in that, like the ELC assignment and the e-guide that we have and the LEG module, sometimes they speak on the same things, and also the e-guide and the LEC assignments that we get. They also touch on things that we learn from other modules, which also works to our advantage as students, because it helps us in our completion of the degree, because everything is just working all together, which I find amazing. So that is my experience with the e-guide, the ELC assignment, and the LEG module.
Thanks very much, Taffy.
Thank you very much, both Ms. Visagie Swart, Mr. Visagie, but also Tafazwa Kamushinda for some of the inputs that you have provided. Sitting here and listening to some of the breaking down of some of the elements that you were doing, I couldn't help but notice that as a student myself on mercantile law or IP law and so forth, it was not necessarily my strong point. And maybe I say to myself, if it was broken down into a more practical way, as you have described it, and I've had the opportunity to go through briefly the e-guide, then I would have done better. The joke around at that point in time, as far as those of us who were not doing great on intellectual property and so forth was, we thought copyright is the right to copy. So our understanding was completely the other way around. Now, I think a number of points were made in relation to companies, non-profit making organizations, the importance of intellectual property, even within the UWC context, within the very limited portfolio that I deal with. We've had a number of conversations about intellectual property, be it in the context of the review of the university's research policy, or in the context of institutes who actually do contract work for other organizations and who owns ownership of the work that is being done, or a number of other faculties where design and so forth related are being done. So it's important, in fact, now in the context of COVID, intellectual property has even come more prominently. We talk about vaccine nationalism. How do we reach out the rest of the world that's not getting the opportunity from the vaccine and so forth? So I think the importance is absolutely critical, and it's an opportunity to engage. And from the e-guide, it's very clear that you've actually cast your net a bit more wider than the specific students and those professionals that are dealing with the topic. Now, having said that, the additional point that I thought was noticeable, I have spent a number of hours in meetings with Professor Lavag. She often mentions blended learning, embedding technology, and reaching the students where they are. So it's not necessarily on the whiteboards or the blackboard. Sometimes it's through podcasts, videos, and so forth. And I think this also speaks to the fact that you're walking the talk. And I think it's an example for many of us who are actually involved in similar activities. The next speaker is Ms. Sintich Dawa from LexisNexis, and the floor is over to you.
There we go. Thank you, Professor, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak at this wonderful event. I'm not going to say much because you've heard now what the e-guide is about and where it fits in, and we'll show it to you soon. So I just want to give you a brief background. As Professor Lawack said, the LexisNexis side of the story. When the authors initially approached me with this project, I was immediately drawn to it. Before I even realized what an interesting and exciting product we'd be creating together, I was drawn to its purpose. To the big picture of developing the entrepreneurial space and to serving the community, to this dream and it becoming reality. And when I told my colleagues at LexisNexis about it, they responded with equal enthusiasm. Let's just do this. And then we realized what an interesting and exciting product we'd be creating. Sorry. Now at LexisNexis, we're no strangers to technology and the e-learning environment. Many lecturers here would know what our Pass Plus online assessments look like. And in the accounting field, we also have a bot called Lexi, which helps students. But until now, the format was different. The scope was different. This was a game changer for us. This is our first fully electronic academic textbook. But of course, it being electronic makes us just so much more than a textbook. It truly is a guide to learning your way around the multiple intricacies and technicalities of setting up a business. And when you use it, you learn through doing what one does when one learns. One reads, one listens, and one does. But normally that happens in different spaces, where here it all happens in one space. And then you have this wealth of resources literally at the tips of your fingers, literally a click away. But showing is better than telling, so I'm going to end off. But before I do, I first want to congratulate UWC on the Zone Learning Initiative and on the creation of the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic. It is truly inspirational. And for us at LexisNexis, it's really a privilege to be involved in it. Also, I want to thank the authors for entrusting your manuscript to us and working tirelessly with us, with myself and my two colleagues, Kitso Matupi and Obi Mutlanke, on building this e-guide. Thank you. Thank you. Melody, can we watch the video, please?
Welcome to the A Practical Legal Guide to Entrepreneurial Venture e-guide. The purpose of this video is to show you how to log into the e-guide and to showcase the course and its incredible features you can make use of. Click on the link in the email you received with your access credentials. On the landing page, insert your username, for example, test1@gmail.com, and password happiness@15, and click Login. On the LexisNexis e-learning page, the objectives and topics of the e-guide are outlined. Click on the Go to Course button. You will be taken to the course overview page where you will see information about the e-guide as well as how to contact us should you experience any problems. You can send an email to tedimusetso@lexisnexis.co.za or to administrator@myacademic.co.za. When you scroll down, you will see a yellow box with the words Enter Guide. Click on it. On the screen, you will find information such as the number of attempts allowed, the number of attempts you have made, the grading method, and grading reported, as well as the different modes you can view the course in. Click on the red box with the word Enter. You will see that your course is loading. Once it has loaded the page, click on Start Learning Guide and it will be highlighted. You will land on the Introduction podcast page. To open the navigation menu, click on the horizontal lines on the top left-hand corner of your screen. You will see various headings such as Introduction Podcast, Objectives, About the Authors, Glossary Terms, etc. When you scroll down, you will see the Objectives heading, and as you keep scrolling, the objectives are explained in greater detail. On this page, there is also an introduction podcast which you can listen to if you click on the play button. If you go back to the navigation menu, for the purpose of this video, we will click on About the Authors. This page shows the authors of this e-guide. The first author introduced is Lynette Visagie Swart, who is a lecturer and legal researcher at the University of Western Cape. When you scroll down, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Academic at the University of Western Cape, Professor Vivian Lavag, can be seen. It is also explained that she is a professor of law in the Mercantile and Labour Law Department. Pieter Johan Visagie is the last author who can be seen on this page. He is a registered patent attorney and partner at Adams & Adams. The page shows the author's academic history, career, and their achievements. If you go back to the navigation menu and click on glossary terms, you will see flashcards with certain words on them. Words such as business, CC, CIPC, and Companies Act 1973 are currently displayed on your screen. When you click on business, the card will flip and an explanation will be provided. In this case, the business owned and operated by one person known as a sole proprietor. Business Act provides the definition of Business Act 71 of 1991 as amended. And when you click on CC, you will see a closed corporation as defined in Section 1 of the Companies Act 2008. In this video, we also click on CIPC, Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, and COIDA. When you scroll further down, many other words are provided for you to learn and refresh your memory on. This is a great way to test yourself. When you scroll down on the navigation menu and click Part A, Introduction to Sole Proprietor in South Africa, You will see a list of outcomes, such as the obligations of a sole proprietor. When you scroll down, the definition of sole proprietorship is given from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. An explanation of sole proprietor and sole proprietorship is explained in detail. Where there are yellow sticky notes with exclamation marks and red blocks, important information has been highlighted for you to take note of. On some pages, like the one we are currently on, there are PDF documents. To show you the application form, which needs to be submitted to reserve a name, a PDF titled Sole Proprietor Annexure A1 has been uploaded. You can click the download button to download it onto your device, or you can click on the link that is provided. There is also a podcast to listen to, which explains how to fill in Form COR 9.1.
Form COR 9.1 is typically filed electronically with SIP-C. This means that you do not have to manually fill in Form COR 9.1, but provide details and information similar to those required by Form COR 9.1 to SIP-C online. If you have a customer account with SIP-C, you can use your online account to do this.
When you scroll further down, there's another PDF and podcast for you, walking you through filling in Form COR 10.1 and Annexure A2. We also have videos for you to watch, which show you in great detail how to fill in forms such as Form COR 9.1. The videos highlight certain parts which are important by zooming in.
It also includes the completion of the next 3 sections, which includes first, your applicant name, identity number or registration number. Second, your 1 to 4 proposed names for the name reservation. And finally, the questionnaire in the 3rd section. In this regard, please ensure that you answer all the questions in section 3. You then need to make the required declaration, sign and date the Form COR 9.1, and then send it to the correct email address at SIP-C.
At the top of your navigation menu, you can check your progress. The more you do, the closer you get to completing the course. Thank you for tuning in, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sintichi Dawa and the team at LexisNexis. I think that demonstration that you just showed actually speaks volumes about its accessibility, that it is actually blending technology into it. And again, as I said earlier, you're actually casting a wider net, not just only for students, but also a much broader stakeholder that can benefit from this. Our next speaker, Professor Michelle Isso, is the Dean of EMS, Economic and Management Sciences at the University of the Western Cape, and she will make some concluding remarks. It's over to you, Professor Isso.
Thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm very excited to be part of this launch, and I'm honored that Professor Lawack has asked me to express some concluding remarks. I hasten to add that I am in the Economic and Management Sciences faculty, and so not in the law faculty, and I won't be commenting on the content, but essentially speaking very briefly to my impressions of an outcome such as this. Let me start off by saying that COVID-19 has conjured many negative connotations, but amidst the negatives, we can lift the positives. And this is what I've been trying to do over the past few months, just to keep me going. For me, there are 2 broad positives. First, the way in which we have managed to keep our focus on organizational goals and objectives through seeking and finding alternative and innovative ways to, in our case, save the academic year. And second, that we are experiencing amazing and innovative outcomes, such as the production of the e-guide, for example, in the midst of a crisis such as a pandemic. With respect to the book, entrepreneurship is a key focus of our university and our faculty. In this regard, and through the zone learning space, we have adopted an experiential learning approach to our academic programs, beyond which we are traditionally accustomed to. The e-guide is a significant outcome in this context and will influence how we think about our learning and teaching in a post-COVID recovery period. Too much has changed, and too much change has been responded to in a significant way. Therefore, this e-guide is an innovative response to the times that we are living in, albeit that the pandemic has impacted humanity in a major, unparalleled, and traumatic way. Access to electronic intellectual sources such as the e-guide makes a valuable contribution to our learning and teaching approaches through the transmission of information towards the development of knowledge that can be applied in a real-world context of entrepreneurship in this regard. As I conclude, I would like to mention that the idea, when shared with me by Professor Lawack, was so encouraging that our faculty has embarked on a similar project. We are in the process of writing a book that is comprised of interdisciplinary chapters with a pragmatic outcome to support our learning and teaching activities in the small business clinic, and that will be of interest to stakeholders across the sectors. Well done, Professor Lawack, Ms. Visagi Swart, and Mr. Visagi on this outcome, that in addition to responding to the impact of the pandemic, facilitates a multidisciplinary approach as we continue our venture of preparing students for the changing world of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor Iso, for those brief to the point and excellent closing remarks, but also for contextualizing it in the time that we're actually living in. What remains for me is to just say a few thank yous. We definitely wish to thank all the program participants, the acting rector in DVC academic and co-author of the book, Professor Vivian Lavag, for opening this event today. I'm not quite sure how she manages her time, how she manages to deal with all the responsibilities that she has and still allocate time to work on an e-guide. That's a conversation for another day, but thank you very much. Professor Michelle Iso for the concluding remarks. Of course, Ms. Lieutenant Visagie Swart, Mr. Pieter Visagie for contributing to this, Ms. Sintiji Dawal, LexisNexis, but of course, Tafazwa Kamushinda, the student who actually spoke on the item. In fact, one of the positive things that comes out from this is the involvement of the students themselves. And I've had the privilege to look at some comments that have been provided by the students in terms of the e-guide. It's already mentioned, and I want to repeat that we want to thank the Chair of Council, Ms. Yasmin Forbes, and Council Member Hanley Vessels for joining us today. A special thank you to all the attendees, UWC staff, students, alumni, external guests, and partners. I would be remiss if I also don't mention my colleagues at the Department of Mercantile and Labor Law, but also thank you, a big thank you to Graham and Melody for the technical support. Again, there were few words that were repeated throughout the presentations. Innovative, creative, skills, practical, pragmatic, which I think are very positive words, which I think are words that are much more relevant now in 2021 than the previous years that we've had. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to having another event. But again, we encourage you to use this e-guide for the intended result that we want to see, so that it can have the impact that we want it to have in the lived reality of people. As we say, as UWC, we are an engaged university, so the impact that it has in the communities is, of course, absolutely important. Congratulations, and this session is over.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mesmoor, and everybody else. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
And to Prof and Lynette and Pieter, thank you for coming up with this e-guide book. It is really helpful.
Thank you, Tafatswa. Much appreciated, and you spoke beautifully, eh?
Thank you.
It's so nice when a student can make the link between the different disciplines in law, and realizing that, you know, you can't study law in isolation, just one part of it, and not seeing how it's integrated with the other parts. So it's lovely that you could actually make that connection. And Santish, are the other people, let me just see who's still in the room. Okay, it's just us. No, there's still some people. No, just saying, Santish, that Walter Geach is coordinating the other book. So they might come and talk to you at some stage.
Great, I'll follow up with him. Thanks very much.
just a heads up there. No, thank you very much, everyone. And
thank you, Prof. Lawack.
You must have, now you can go and relax, Lynette.
I will.
Get some sleep, Lynette.
No, it was a big moment for us, and yeah, it was lovely that you all could be a part of it. I really appreciate it. Go and have a nice glass and relax, sit back and relax.
Definitely.
Prof Lavag, maybe just a credit to UWC. I sit in many of these types of workshops and presentations. I've now sat in 2 of UWC. The one was with the TTO and this one. And the seamless way in which it runs is really impressive. So I think your IT team and everyone there deserves some credit. It's really a professional show that you put on.
Thank you so much. I must tell you, Pieter, that Melody, I think she taught herself, she jumped on this when COVID happened, and Graham also just stepped into this space. So they've now we're doing so many webinars and other kinds of events virtually that they have really made this their own. You know, if you can't, it's like really this stupid thing. If you have lemons, you can make lemonade, something like that. So they really had a positive take on COVID. You know, this is what it is, and they really made it their own. No, Melody and Graham, thank you so much. You guys were really awesome.
Yes.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Welcome.
You're going to close it for us now, Graham. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.